God Valley, the island where legends were made while others faded into the dark corners of history. An island that holds massive significance in the story of One Piece, shaping the world we know today. And still, the details of its disappearance remains one of the series' longest standing mysteries. Where did it go? What happened to it? And also, what was God Valley in the first place? Because before we dive into what may have happened to God Valley, I want to start with the speculation about its origins. Because if there's one thing we know about One Piece, it's that often islands are never what they first appear to be. Remember Jaya? Cricket's house was literally cut in half because of the knock-up stream, which launched part of the island, including the city of gold, Shandora, straight into the sky. That same myth that people laughed at turned out to be true, hidden above the clouds. Or take Water 7, a city that's been gradually sinking beneath the sea for centuries. And then there's Thriller Bark, an island that was turned into a ship, or Zo, a giant elephant carrying an entire civilization on its back, or Wano, the original kingdom having sunk deep underwater. Actually, on that note, all the islands that we know of today are said to be part of only one continent after the great flooding following the Void Century that sank all the other islands deep under the sea. Going back to my point that in this world, geography itself bends to Oda's imagination. Nothing is what it seems. And that constant mystery is part of what makes the series so great. So if we take that in the context of God Valley, it's not outlandish at all to think that this image right here may not be what the island originally looked like. This island is only a fragment of what it once was. Because let's take a moment to think about the name of the island itself, God Valley. Why single this island out with such a divine title? There's definitely some symbolism here that feels pretty intentional. In chapter 1095, the Celestial Dragons say that the island has the audacity to call itself God Valley, which tells us that the Celestial Dragon or the world government didn't give the island its name. It already held that title long before. Combine that with the island's rich natural resources and the discovery that some of the series' most special clans, potentially even rare races, live there, making it the perfect stage for their twisted game, but also increasing the mystery of what is this island? Why is it so special? And if we talk about where that name may have come from, because Oda doesn't just hand out names like God Valley for no reason, giving the island such a divine title feels like it's a setup, like it's going to connect later on to have some deep, almost sacred meaning. And that meaning, well, personally, I've been thinking, take a look at the way that God Valley is drawn. Its most iconic image is those two twin peaks with a massive gap in the middle, as if the island or its most prominent mountain was sliced cleanly down the middle by a sword, or like a sliver of it was removed entirely. For years, that's the image we've carried of God Valley. And if you go by the descriptions on the One Piece wiki, the island is characterized by tall cliffs and canyons with that giant rock formation in the middle split right down the center, forming one vast valley-like ravine. Supposedly why it's called God Valley. But recently in chapter 1160, we finally got to see the island from another angle, and suddenly it doesn't just look like a sandstone canyon anymore. From that perspective, it looks like something else. Like the remains of a tree stump. Do you see that? To me, that looks like the bottom of a tree trunk that has been cut or hollowed out. And that got me thinking, where else have we seen an island that is actually a giant tree? Elbaf. Elbaf, the land of giants. The home to the oldest Atom tree in the series, and Atom trees are some of the most important resources in the world of One Piece. So am I suggesting that God Valley was once an Atom tree? Yeah, I think I am. We have to remember that this entire God Valley flashback is happening during the current Elbaf arc, and a physical link between God Valley and Elbaf could also provide a fitting reason for its divine name. Elbaf itself is rooted in Norse mythology, split into realms like the underworld, the sunworld, and the astral or heavenly world. So if God Valley was also the remains of a divine tree, that would put it right in line with this mythological divine framework. But if that's true, then what happened to it? Why doesn't it look like a tree anymore? Well, here's where my thinking goes one step further. I think the missing piece of God Valley, the part in the middle that looks like it was carved away, that could have been used to build the Noah, the ship of promise, which again would tie God Valley directly back to something divine via the biblical story of Noah's Ark, a vessel of salvation made from sacred wood in order to fulfill God's promise. We know that the One Piece Noah, the ship of promise, isn't just some oversized boat. This thing is absolutely massive. In fact, it's said to be half the size of Fishman Island. That's not just a ship, that's a floating fortress. And if you think about how much material it would take to actually build something on that scale, normal timber isn't just going to cut it. I think most fans have already assumed that the Noah must have been made from the Adam tree, even though there's been nothing to confirm that as of yet. So this could be one explanation. If God Valley was once an Adam tree, then that huge section in the middle could be a chunk of that tree that was carved out to construct the Noah. That would explain not only the scale of the ship, but also why the island's geography almost looks unnatural, like something has been intentionally cut away. And I have to say, the symbolism lines up quite perfectly too. The Noah is called the Ship of Promise, so if the wood came from an island also branded with a divine name, God Valley, that would double down on this idea that this was no ordinary construction project. This was divine by nature, both in origin and in purpose. It would make the god in God Valley make sense here. The island wasn't just named after some pompous celestial dragon title. Its very land, its tree, its resources. It may have literally been the foundation for one of the most sacred artifacts in One Piece history. Especially now that we know that God Valley was home to at least some of the Davy D clan. Although the full mystery of why the Davy D clan in particular are so special has yet to be revealed, we can already start to see the huge implications, the connections. As one of the D clan families, we know that the Davy D must be deeply intertwined with the Void Sentry and Joy Boy. Joy Boy could have even been Davy D. Jones himself. And then the Elbaf link via the Adam Tree, which is also so deeply rooted in ancient lore with their Nika worship. And then you consider the special races in the One Piece world who also know of Joy Boy, one of them being the Lunarians, who were once considered gods, versus the D clan, who are now considered the enemies of the gods, the celestial dragons of course parading themselves as divine when they're actually fake gods. I just can't help but think that this might all be connected. And I don't know if it's because I just watched the Demon Slayer Infinity Castle film and I've been seeing a lot of Yorme recently, but when I look at how God Valley has been drawn, to me, those two peaks, the ridges, they resemble a pair of hands, almost like their hands preparing to pray. And this had me thinking about why this island is called God Valley and what it may have originally been, its connections to the gods. And so that's my take on what God Valley may originally have been. But let me know your take down below by leaving a comment. And also, if you've enjoyed the discussion so far, then please subscribe to the channel. It is September, so you officially have to join, but also would really love for the JoyFleet to get to 100,000 subscribers. We're just a bunch of One Piece fans who love to discuss our favorite series, and if you're watching this video, that's probably you, so please do join us. Alright, so now that we have explored the potential origin of God Valley, whether it was the remains of a divine tree, even the source of the legendary Ship of Promise, the next big question is, what actually happened to it? Because at the end of the day, no matter how much we speculate on where it may have come from, the canon fact remains the same. God Valley vanished from the map. Just gone. So let's dive into the leading theories about where it went or what it might have been turned into. One theory is that the reason why God Valley vanished is because it was lifted into the sky and repurposed as Uranus, if it wasn't Uranus to begin with. And if we go back to those mountain peaks of God Valley and tilt them sideways or even upside down, I guess they could be reimagined to look like a weapon barrel. To me, it does seem like it could be something that could shoot laser beams. series, and I'm no Gundam expert, but a friend mentioned that God Valley actually resembles the twin buster rifle from Gundam Wing, so I looked it up and I can totally see the similarity. That's basically where this whole idea started for me. Out of the three ancient weapons, we already know where Pluton and Poseidon are. The only one left unconfirmed is Uranus, which naturally leaves fans throwing all sorts of theories as to where Uranus or what it could be, its current status, its location. And one of the more popular ideas is that Uranus isn't just hidden somewhere, it actually is God Valley. The world government has a very clear habit of erasing history whenever ancient weapons are involved or the world's deepest, darkest secrets are involved. The Void Century, Polynoglyphs, Pluton's blueprints, all kept hidden away or all being highly sought after so that they can keep it under wraps or for themselves. So that the fact that God Valley has been completely wiped off the record, vanished from the maps, that could suggest that it's more than just the island where a massive battle took place. It holds much greater significance for the world government. It seems that when Garling recommended God Valley to be the host of the native hunting competitions, he was talking about the specialness of God Valley as being the home of the DVD clan, but there could be much more to it than that. It could have to do with the island itself. Garling might have found out, in addition to the DVD clan's existence, this island is actually Uranus. Alternatively, if God Valley itself wasn't Uranus, then maybe the simpler answer is that it was destroyed by Uranus. We've already seen what that looks like. Back in chapter 1060, when Lulusia was completely wiped off the map by what seemed like massive blasts raining down from the skies. If that was Uranus in action, then maybe God Valley was its first victim nearly 40 years earlier. And here's the chilling part. In that very same chapter, the five elders declare that Lulusia never existed. Doesn't that sound familiar? It's almost like a dark mirror of what happened to God Valley. The difference, of course, being that God Valley's erasure came decades earlier, so instead of foreshadowing, it's like some dark, backwards echo. A pattern that started with the Void Century and then repeated with God Valley and Lulusia in real time. Entire islands being wiped off the face of the earth when it doesn't serve the world government or Imu for them to remain in existence. But there is actually a massive counter to this. When Lulusia was destroyed, it wasn't just the island that vanished. There was a global effect. The sea levels across the world rose by 1 full meter. Entire islands disappeared. Shores were swallowed, beaches erased. It was a major seismic activity that was felt all around the world. And now, if something like that was to happen, or did happen nearly 40 years earlier when God Valley disappeared, we would expect to have heard something about it. A global earthquake, a sudden rise in the seas, some ripple effect remembered in history. When Vegapunk makes his earth-shattering announcement, citing the recent Lulusia disappearance as being similar to what happened 800 years ago, you would have thought that he would have mentioned something similar happening 38 years ago. But as far as we know, there's been no mentions of some sort of seismic activity tied to the God Valley incident, or when God Valley disappeared. And unless the world government had some kind of other weapon, some kind of other resource available back then, an alternative to the Mother Flame, it's hard to explain how they could have activated Lulusia. Because in chapter 1086, when Imu and the five elders talk about testing the Mother Flame, the way they talk about it makes it sound like this was their very first time using it. Which means the destruction of Lulusia was most likely the debut of that power, not something that they had unleashed decades earlier also at God Valley. So then, what else can make an entire island disappear? Well, how about if an island is disguised as something entirely different? So now we have to talk about one of my personal favorites. What if God Valley actually became Thriller Bark? Now at first that sounds wild, right? But once you start stacking up the evidence, it actually doesn't seem so far-fetched. First off, the Rocks Pirates connection. We already know that Thriller Bark had the zombies of multiple Rocks Pirates. pirates, Captain John, Gilbastar, and Ganzui. How could Moira have ended up with the bodies of those big names? Well, since the Rock's pirates were major players during the God Valley incident, this could closely tie Thriller Bark back to the legendary battle site. And then there's Brooke's line from chapter 443. He straight up says that Thriller Bark used to be an island from the West Blue, and God Valley was an island located in the West Blue during its existence. Add to that, Moria himself is from the West Blue. A coincidence that maybe just lines up too well. Speaking of Brooke, we know that he's somehow connected to Gunko, another major figure during the God Valley incident, as one of the participants in the native hunting competition on behalf of the Man-Mare family. And Brooke and Gunko seem to share a memory of Gunko's childhood back from when Brooke was still alive, which could then tie Brooke's Thriller Bark connection back to his connection to Gunko, which would mean that he's being tied not just to Gunko, but potentially back to God Valley itself. So if Thriller Bark really is the remnant of God Valley, then Brooke's connection to both the island and to Gunko seems suddenly a lot less random and a lot more like intentional seeding, like a twist of fate. Next, the mystery of the disappearance. God Valley was said to vanish without a trace, whereas Thriller Bark's original island name has never been revealed. It's just an island from the West Blue. Could the reason be why Oda has never revealed its name is because it's actually the same island? A twist that he's been holding back for decades. And then let's not forget Kuma. Out of all the warlords, he was the one that showed up at the end of the Thriller Bark arc. Was that just a random assignment, or did the world government need someone who could get to Thriller Bark super fast, like instantly fast, making Kuma the obvious choice because of his poor devil fruit? In which case, something we know about Kuma's devil fruit powers is that it only lets him travel to places that he's actually been before. But based on chapter 1099, when Oda made a point of showing us how Kuma visited each of the places he sent the Straw Hats to during the time skip, we never see him visit Thriller Bark. I mean, sure, it's possible that he might have passed by Thriller Bark during one of his travels at some point, but the point is, we never see it. And when you connect that back to his God Valley flashback, the moment that he ate the pawpaw fruit and used it to escape Saturn, it starts to line up. If Thriller Bark really was God Valley, then Kuma had already been there, meaning that his arrival at Thriller Bark wasn't random at all, it was completely logical. To make things even crazier, Oda might be setting up an even deeper link via Moria himself. In Yamato's ongoing cover story, Moria is highly suggested to have Kazuki ties, and if that ends up being true, it's yet another thread connecting Moria, Thriller Bark, and by extension God Valley back to Wano and the larger Void Century narrative. There's also the more recent manga hint or potential clue. In chapter 1159, we see a young character who looks suspiciously like Gecko Moria, standing next to a woman who resembles Victoria Sindri, the same actress Hogback obsessed over back in Thriller Bark. It could just be Oda trolling us, maybe it's some deliberate foreshadowing, but it just does feel like a massive wink from Oda. Either way, it's an odd little breadcrumb to just ignore. And when you pull all of this together, the Rock's pirate zombies, the West Blue setting, Kuma's history, and even Moria's possible Kazuki heritage, I just can't help but agree that Thriller Bark being the remnant of God Valley starts to feel like more than just a mere coincidence. And then if we even link this back to my original God Valley is an Adam Tree idea, then maybe there's a reason why Thriller Bark is called Thriller Bark. Bark just like the outside skin of a tree. I mean, we know that Thriller was most probably inspired by the Michael Jackson song and his zombie-filled music video, but where does the bark come from? Yeah, maybe because the island is covered by forests and there is the existence of zombie trees, but there could be another hidden meaning connecting it back to God Valley, aka the Adam Tree. Let's pump the brakes for a second because there are quite a few problems with this idea. For one, Thriller Bark does not match God Valley's scale. It feels way too small to be a whole island. But could it be just a remnant? Just a piece of God Valley that got broken off during the huge God Valley incident? I also have to say, visually speaking, they don't quite line up. God Valley's iconic mountain peaks are missing, missing, and Thriller Bark just looks like a lot of ancient ruins. But in that case, that could actually make sense in the context of God Valley being the site of a massive clash between the world's strongest figures and the hunting competition, which definitely could have reduced the island to ruins. And actually, if you look at this panel of chapter 1160, I actually think this really does look quite a lot like Thriller Bark. And look, all of this is just to say that personally, I think this is quite a fun theory with quite the convincing parallels. But of course, unless Oda decides to drop a hammer in the flashback, we're just gonna have to wait and see. In the meantime, let me know what you think by leaving a comment below. What do you think God Valley was? Where do you think it is now? Share your thoughts down below. I'd love to read it. If you enjoyed today's discussion, please like the video, share the video, and please do subscribe to help the Joy Fleet get to 100,000 subscribers. But also it means that you don't miss out on any riveting One Piece discussions. You can also help support the channel further by becoming a Patreon or channel member like these wonderful people. But as always, thank you for listening to another one of my crazy One Piece ramblings. This is JoyGirl, and I'll see you again soon.